Well, Kerry County Councillors were unanimous this week in their support for parents and relatives of people with intellectual disabilities who are campaigning against moves by St John of God's to move residents to community facilities from the St Mary of the Angels home near Beaufort between Killorglin and Killarney. The process of decongregation is government policy. It aims to have people with disability moved to smaller settings away from larger institutional environments. However, families in Kerry say their relatives view St Mary of the Angels as home and they'd be distressed by any move given how long many of them have spent there, some of them back to the 1970s. Paddy Connolly is CEO of Inclusion Ireland, an advocacy group for people with disabilities. He supports decongregation or moves to the community, and earlier he gave me his reaction to Kerry County Councillors' unanimous opposition to this move.
Well, I think the public representatives are doing what they should be doing, which is ensuring that the families are heard and that their concerns are listened to. I mean, I think it's very problematic, the behaviour of St John of God's in not informing families about the transition plans for persons with a disability, putting people on housing lists without informing families or indeed receiving the consent of people who are currently living in St Mary of the Angels. And when I met with families,
they've said, St John of God's have said that they've flagged this for a number of years and that this has been on the cards for a number of years.
Well, I saw the correspondence from St John of God's and I spoke to the families, and the reference in their statements to meeting with families, I think, is putting a gloss on their attempts to engage with families. In fact, the families have said it's a number of years since they've met with St John of God's. And it's not about sending out letters to family and letting them know. It's about engaging in a proper process of consultation, involving them in the planning right from the early stages, not telling them you have a house bought and your family member is going to be moving, but involving them right from the very beginning in the early stages of planning, and making sure that the family are involved and making sure the person with a disability involved. So I think St John of God's have a lot to answer to, and I think some of the focus of the current debate by local representatives should be focused on them and their behaviour and how can that be improved.
Now, they're concerned as well about the resources that are there in the community. Jack Fitzpatrick, who's campaigning on behalf of families who have relatives in St Mary of the Angels, has said that he's seen a house outside where one person is living. He describes an 8 to 10 foot wooden fence around the back garden. Councillor Johnny Healy-Ray said that he was aware of one case where a resident had been moved from the centre at a cost of $600,000 only to be returned a short time later. It hasn't, as a pilot scheme for decongregation, it wouldn't seem to be ideal.
I think we're probably mixing up different issues here. This is not a pilot. I think people have been moved out of institutions in Ireland for dozens and dozens of years, and thousands of people have been moved out of institutions. This is not a pilot scheme the way it's been described in some of the media. This is a part of a programme over a long number of years to move people out of inappropriate institutions, to live in a community the same way that you and I live in the community. So there's a sense down there that this is something new. It's not. It's gone on for a long time. And all the evidence is that people do better living in community settings. But again, you're right in many respects. Supports in the community are the critical thing for families, that they don't believe and there isn't the trust there that their family members will get the resources and the supports that they get in the community. But the difficulty with this is that we can't talk about groups of people. There are 77 people in this particular centre, but there are hundreds and thousands. There are thousands, 3,500 in a number of other settings around the country. We can no longer treat persons with a disability as large groups that should be moved into a centre and moved here or there. Each person should be treated as an individual with rights in their own respect, and they should be assessed in terms of what their own support needs are and how those support needs are going to be met. And the HSE and service providers have to show bona fides and make sure those resources are put in place. But we can't talk about people in groups any longer the way we have done in the past.
Sure, but would you accept that what's going on in Kerry at the moment with St Mary of the Angels may colour people's view of the decongregation of settings? It certainly has the families of relatives there dead set against it.
No, absolutely, and the primary reason they're dead set against it is, one, because it's been handled very badly by the HSE and St John of God's. Two, they have fears that they won't get the support in the community, and they actually don't believe that the services and supports will be available in the community. And they have concerns around the fears of people's safety in more community settings, because they see a setting where people are more free to move around.
Well, what reaction did you
go
get
wrong.
from the families? I mean, we quoted in the Kerry man, Anne Hannon, who says her 47-year-old brother Johnny has been a resident in St Mary since 1974, said her family can't make any sense of the move. She's quoted as saying, "We can't fathom a decision taken in some faraway office to disrupt this tranquil life. His severe autism prevents him from having anywhere else." That would suggest that she's not minded for turning on this at all.
No, and that would be generally my experience of the families in Kerry, that they are dead set against the move, that they're not prepared to concede in that. And there was a public meeting last week, which I saw on the television, where there were hundreds of people at it. So, I mean, I think that reflects the experience down there. And as I say, I think a lot of that is driven with how it has been managed and families not being involved in the process. And that is the challenge. I mean, I think that is a challenge for St John of God and a challenge for the HSE. To meet with families, and certainly political representatives should be, at a minimum, insisting that families' voices are fully heard in this process. But we still have the issue that decongregation has been described in the UN Convention on Rights of Persons with Disabilities, etc., as vital for persons with a disability, that it is a breach of people's human rights to live in these types of institutionalised settings. And so we have an issue here that political leadership needs to be shown. Certainly the Minister, the Senior Minister for Health, and Taoiseach need to get behind this process and ensure that the deinstitutionalisation of these centres continues, but that this government will commit the resources to it. And this is one of the issues, that a poor level of resources have been put into this over the last 10 years. We're way behind where we should be. At the current rate, it will be 20 years before we move 3,500 people out of these inappropriate settings. So investment and resources need to be put into it. Families need to see that the supports and services are there in the community. Key institutions need to be informing people about what this process is about, that it is better for people in the longer term, that yes, there will be difficulties, but that all the evidence is that people do better in smaller settings.
That was Paddy Connolly, the CEO of Inclusion Ireland. Well, we did ask for an interview with the Minister with responsibility for disabilities, Finian McGrath. He wasn't available. We asked for an interview with the representative of John God's. No representative was available there. However, they did email us a statement. They said St Mary of the Angels is not closing. There are no plans to move any resident without full consultation with the person, the family and their advocate, and that all transition plans begin with an exploration process in consultation with the individual, the family and their advocate of what is required to meet the needs of each individual.